Do you know what it is yet?
I still don't know what it is.
Take a crack. What's?
It's a really nice ukulele tune.
It's
one of the 6 you know.
You said you've been listening to a lot of him recently.
Really? Oh.
It's one of his first songs. One of his first. It's not his first song.
Yeah. Putting me on the spot, dude.
Johnny Cash.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That was a Johnny Cash one?
Ring of Fire.
That was Ring of Fire?
Yeah.
I know Ring of Fire. Dude. Okay. Which part of Ring of Fire is it?
Whatever part you want it to be. Sorry, this is episode 31, and we are in our new headquarters. This is the first time we've done the podcast in here, right? Yeah? Right, Steven? We did one? Oh, with me, yeah. But this is the first time we've actually had the whole setup here. So we're on Facebook Live now. So if you have any questions during this podcast and you want to write them below, we'll do our best to answer them. But in studio today, in office today, as in every other day, we have David Sigler, who is the Director of Operations here for The Alternative Daily. Welcome, David.
Welcome to everybody out there.
Yeah, so the premise of today's podcast is a little bit different. The way I kind of actually want to set it up is, regarding politics, regarding if something happens in your life, a lot of people always say, well, screw it, I'm moving to Canada. And so all my super liberal friends who have said if Donald Trump gets the nomination, they're moving to Canada. So what happens if you actually move to Canada? And so I figured, why not have the best person I know to do it, which is David Sigler, who holds dual citizenship between Canada and the United States. So we're going to go through some of the really cool ins and outs of Canada, which some people may find boring, on the outset, but when we actually dig into it, it's not that boring of a place.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. But yes, David Sigler's been with us now for how many years? Been with us?
Almost since the beginning. Depends how you consider
Almost since the beginning.
In some ways, before the beginning.
Yeah, we met how many years ago now?
6.5 maybe, or 7.
6.5, 7. Do I know Ralph more? Did we figure this out? Do I know Ralph more?
About the same.
About the same. Yeah, he's not listening to us.
He's mumbling in the back.
He's mumbling us. So yeah, let's call it 7 years. Let's round up, right?
Sure.
And we've been doing this now for about 5 years, going on 6, something like that. Yeah. And then you actually came aboard full time roughly
about a year and a half ago.
And running operations and running a lot of things. So if you ever buy any of our books, David's helped put those together, and all of the systems that go through in ordering and putting out the content and everything, David oversees. So it's good to have your face here. It's good to have you down here in Juno Beach, Florida, where we have the new headquarters. How do you like the new office?
I love it. Yeah. I love the area. It's fantastic.
Stephen, how long have we been in the office?
3 weeks.
3 weeks. And you've been in this office?
2.
You like it?
It's great.
Yeah. We started off as a virtual company, which I've always liked. I'm a big proponent of virtual companies, and we still are. Majority of the people that work for us are virtual, but it was important for us to get a headquarters together so that we can actually start doing some stuff and collaborating a bit more.
Yep.
And I think it was a good thing for us to do.
Yep.
So let's get into it. And out there, if you're listening on podcast, if you would like to win one of these awesome bags of organic coffee, this is a good plug, right?
Yeah.
If you want to win a bag of organic coffee, absolutely free, I'll send it directly to you. Put in a question down below. If it has to do about Canada, great. If it doesn't, great. And if we answer it, even better, because you're gonna get a bag of coffee. So, boom. You like that?
Very good.
Prince died. We just found out Prince died.
Yeah.
Were you a Prince fan at all?
No, I wasn't actually.
Just didn't like the music, or just?
No, actually David Bowie died not that long ago. I wasn't a big David Bowie guy either.
Who is your favorite? Johnny Cash?
Well, I like Johnny Cash. Definitely not my favorite. Like my favorite single solo type artist. It's a good question. My favorite group is probably still Pentatonics, actually.
I don't even know who that is.
Yeah, it's an a cappella group. They won one of those shows.
Okay.
The Sing Off a few years ago.
A cappella. We should start singing in here.
We should start singing in here.
There you go, Steven. I can play. I guess I was going to say I can play the ukulele, but the point is not to play the ukulele, right? And David, another part of your background is also health and wellness. You're an expert when it comes to it, which is one of the many reasons that I brought you over to the Alternative Daily was to help with that, because if I've said from day one, I am not the expert. I just believe I do a good job of getting the experts together, and you were one of them. So, so David definitely has a background and an expertise.
That's probably a better way to put it than an expert.
There we go. I prefer expert. You're an expert. Steven's an expert. Ralph's an expert.
There you go.
Ralph's an expert in taking off his shoes and just making himself at home,
He
too.
looks good.
He looks good and comfortable. So let's get right into it. So we talk about, with all the American politics going on, with Donald Trump, with Bernie Sanders, and you have all these different, establishment, non-establishment people. It's even for me as an American voter, although I just figured I'm a registered independent. I went to vote in the primary, and they said I am what's it called? Party unaffiliated or something
Correct.
like
That's
that.
me too.
And I couldn't vote either
Nope.
or. And
It's closed
they
here in
wouldn't
Florida.
they wouldn't let me do it,
No.
which I understand. I thought that I was, but I wasn't. So when it comes to, and it was Canada who just recently had elections too,
true.
and they don't have a president. Is it a president?
No,
Prime
it's
minister.
called the
right?
prime minister.
How does that operate?
Well, actually, the head of state, interestingly enough, is the governor general. It's not even the prime minister. And the governor general is appointed by the Queen, little known thing, in the U.S., because the U.S. doesn't often follow what's going on in Canada. Did you know something special about today? And it has to do with Canada.
Is it Canada Day?
That's a good point. That's July 1st, which is close to July 4th, like the U.S., but it's the Queen's birthday.
Oh, I did know that.
Yeah.
She's 90. Is that
She's
what-
exactly 90
Yeah.
years old today. That's right. And
Good
she's
for her.
in a way, she's actually kind of has a role in the whole running of the country. But it's less official and more figurehead. But it is considered, we have still the monarchy type thing going on, and she appoints the governor general, who's the head of state.
No, but now the prime minister is.
The prime minister is in charge of the government and is the leader of the party that won.
Right.
But was never elected independently. Like we have a president here in the U.S. that's elected independently. The prime minister is not elected as the prime minister. The person is just the head of the party that wins.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So we have a list of questions here. Kind of the main one, as I kind of got into it with the political side and why I wanted to get there, is people always say, I'm moving to Canada because I don't like it here, right? Whether you're
Right.
disgruntled or whatever, or even some people down here in Florida say they're moving to the Bahamas, right? Because
Right.
I don't know what the government's like there, but low taxes. Why would someone want to move to Canada? What would be the benefits of actually moving to Canada?
Well, I'll tell you my story. I lived there for 40
It's cold. I don't know if I'd want to move there.
Well, I know. I've known you for a number of years, and that was the number one thing. First time I met you in person, you remember that was in D.C. area, and it was November, and you were wearing sandals.
Yeah, and
wondering
it was
what was
cold.
and it was cold because,
I
of
don't know
course,
what
it's
I was
cold. Why would you move to Canada now? Possibly to escape the political climate here. I suppose that's what a lot of people are saying. I moved there when I was 11, so I didn't have a lot of choice. My family moved there, so I lived there 43 years. And we just moved back. Well, I say back. My wife's Canadian, so I brought her here 18 months ago. So we've been here that long.
Yeah.
And
But
I
why?
Can,
Why?
I can
It's
tell
cold.
we left Canada because
Right.
it was cold. So that was our primary reason to get out of there. But why people might go to Canada, it's definitely what I would consider to be a more sort of liberal, open-minded, sort of freer society. In the U.S., you have a lot more extremes.
Sure.
So here you'll get people, very extreme one way, and you get them very extreme.
Would you
the
say?
other
Would you
way.
classify it as being like laid back, more laid back?
It's probably yes. It would be more laid back.
Gotcha. But there are some extreme parties, correct?
Not as much as I would say here, but there
Okay.
are some people in some of the parties that are somewhat more extreme. That's true.
Okay. Now, when you moved here, did you have to jump through? You didn't have to jump through a bunch of hoops, did you?
Well,
because you already.
no, that's a good question. Actually, I could come down at any time all the years I was in Canada, and of course I visited here many, many, many times. My wife, on the other hand, couldn't just move here. Like a lot of people think, oh, we have to worry about immigration. They're letting people in too easily. Well, it took her 6-7 months to be allowed to come into the country as an immigrant. So it wasn't that easy to do it. And
Right.
she's married to somebody who, was a kind of a no-brainer that they would let me in. I don't have any record or
Right.
anything fancy going on there. So it was pretty easy. Some people take 2-3 years,
Yeah.
even as spouses. And if you're a family member, it can take 4 years. And if you don't have any ties, it's
Yeah.
a very slow process.
So let's get into actually some of the major issues and polarizing issues, right? These are things that are definitely talked about and people love, people hate, etc. But let's talk about it. So I like to do. So weed, marijuana. How does Canada stand on the marijuana laws there?
Well, it's actually not that much different than the U.S. right now. The funny thing is, I just saw something. I think it was a CNN alert or something, it was a CBC alert in Canada. That's what I did. I got that on my little mobile device, and it said today the government announced in Canada that they were going to legalize it federally across the board, but the legislation's not coming in until next spring. So
they're going to
another
completely
year.
legalize it.
Yeah.
Is that for recreational use too?
once it's one of those situations where you have to wait till the legislation actually comes out. The theory is that's where they're heading. That's
right.
Justin Trudeau. That was one of his platforms last fall
Sure.
when they had the election. He was looking at doing that, and obviously a lot of people felt that was a very positive thing. We do have medicinal use marijuana that's relatively legal. Depends on province by province. In Canada, you have provinces.
Yeah.
Here we have states, of course, in the U.S. But it's fairly similar in terms of how.
Have you ever smoked weed?
It's a good question. I think it was called something else.
Am I putting you on the spot? Is this okay?
Stuff back as a teenager.
So you haven't touched it since, roughly?
No, for sure not. But
Okay.
probably as a teenager, I think yes, probably something along that line.
It's okay to say yes, by the way. It's not as taboo anymore. I remember when my parents told me that they had smoked weed before, and they don't do it now at all. But I think I was maybe 13 or 14. I remember them telling me, and I was a very sensitive child at that time. Maybe even younger. I actually cried. I was like, "Why? I can't believe you did that." But okay, all right. So in Canada, do you remember? Was it easy to get when you were younger?
Well, that would have been in
Did
the
you
U.S.
have friends?
actually.
Oh, the U.S. It was in the U.S.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I think it was in the U.S. when I was visiting some cousin or something, actually, and it was with my brother. And anyway, whatever.
And
Enough said.
What do you think the driving force is behind the legalization of marijuana? Obviously there's the medicinal purposes, which are great. There's recreational use. Is that great? Who knows, right? I mean, that's what you want to do behind your closed doors.
Right.
Do you think the big thing is the decriminalization, meaning not loading up jails with people who just
Right.
have a few ounces or whatever it is on them?
No, I think that's a big issue. I'm a big fan of legalizing almost everything.
Yeah, we talked about it. You said you would legalize cocaine, right?
Well, I think you could legalize almost everything, and not because I think it's a good idea for people to use the substance, and substance abuse is a big problem. We don't, alcohol's legal, let's face it, and it's probably the number one most abused substance of all, and I think there's little question about that. But the problem with things being illegal is there's this stigma associated with things, and really doesn't matter if you had a bit of this or a bit of that. And somebody with a bit of this is treated, thrown in jail for 20 years. Somebody with a bit of that is let off or done nothing. It doesn't seem right. The second, maybe bigger issue is the whole issue of organized crime and the criminal element. And when you put things underground, you get all sorts of nefarious
So you think that
things
if you were actually to legalize all of it, it actually will help bring organized crime down?
I think it will help. I think it will help avoid the whole criminal element big time. Yes, it'll help people so they don't get incarcerated for sort of silly, fairly small things. Doesn't necessarily mean we should promote trafficking, but I think what's happening in some places in Canada and the U.S. too, especially like Colorado and several of the states that have done this, is they're finding out they can make a fair amount of money, tax revenue, based on legalizing the product, which now promotes the other states to do the same thing. So it's taking it out of the shadows and putting it in a place so people just acknowledge.
Now, what about, if you don't mind, let's drill this down a little bit even more. Stuff like meth, which people literally blow themselves up making. Is that still, and I'm not saying this is your political platform you stand on, but is that something, it's everything. We're going to legalize everything.
I think in general you should legalize a lot of things. I'm not saying you should legalize everything. I think you just have to recognize and do that smart think through. Is legalizing it? I think the problem I get into, and I alluded to extremism here, there's some people who get in these extreme groups and they hold on to one position.
Right.
And the problem with holding on to a very rigid position is it has very often unintended consequences that are pretty bad. And this is a perfect case where that happens very often, I think. So we have to really think through things and be willing to say, you know what, while we don't want to promote the use of it, by legalizing it, we actually help the bigger societal issues. And that's what I think is
Interesting.
going on.
So I'm going to segue into another polarizing thing, but going off that, because I think the argument could be made against what you just said within this next topic. But Stephen, if we have any questions, make sure you just flag me down and let me know. So gun control, right? So what is gun control like? Is there gun control? I mean, we have gun control here in the United States, regardless of whether people like it or don't. It's here, and it's been for a while, right? In Canada, what is the gun control? What's going on there?
Well, Canada has a lot of rural population, actually long guns, rifles, that sort of thing. I think there's probably as much in Canada as there is in the U.S. The big problem in the U.S., I think, is handguns, and handguns sort of going out of control. Canada has clamped down on quite a bit. Britain, even to a larger extent, has clamped down on it. And the numbers, again, forgetting about the principles, and I don't want to park the Second Amendment, but let's park it just for a minute. If we just look at the numbers, it's kind of obvious that if you have less guns, you have less gun crime. In the U.S., I mean, because people have this sense that they have a right, the average person has 1.1 guns. I don't know if you knew that, but the average person in the U.S. has 1.1 guns. In Canada, it's 0.3 guns.
Gotcha.
So it's about 3 or 4 times as many.
Now, what about the
guns.
argument of, bad people will get guns? I mean,
I think that's true. I think bad people get guns in Canada and other countries, and they do in the U.S. as well. I think the biggest problem on the handgun side specifically is kids getting in hold of them and
Sure.
It's unintended consequences. So you can have a hard line, but then you have to. What are you going to do about the unintended
But
consequences?
I'm not going to let you off the hook off this one, which is you said let's park the Second Amendment for a second. You can't do that, right? You just can't do that. And here in the United States, and we have the Second Amendment, which talks about the right to bear arms. Now, again, there's 2 schools of thought on what that actually means. Did it mean like really it was only for groups of people to defend themselves as a government where they would take them, etc., or was it our right to have a gun on us at all times? That can be argued to the day is done, and there could be no. Everybody's going to be left, with their own opinion of that. But here's the bottom line: it's in the Constitution. It's there. It's not going anywhere, right?
Right.
So that's why I personally believe that it's this debate is always going to be ongoing, but there's not going to be super uber duper gun control because it's in the Constitution. It's in our United States Constitution. But is it actually reside in the Canadian Constitution?
No, we don't have the same. We don't have the same history of the issue. So I think people aren't going to hang on to it as much in Canada. But I think back to your point of yes, sure, it's the Second Amendment. It's here and it's not going to go anywhere. I think it still can go somewhere, not necessarily by changing the Second Amendment, but by interpreting the Second Amendment in different ways. So I would argue, even going to the Supreme Court, they could interpret the way it's written and do a lot more gun control than we currently do.
But guns, there's not going to be an all-out ban on guns in the United States.
But you know what's funny? I mean, President Obama hasn't tried to ban guns at all.
Right.
I wouldn't say he's pro-gun, but he's been very
Right.
Call it balanced, if
Right.
you like. I in this particular issue, I did live in Canada a long time, and I'm most worried about handguns. It's one of the issues that bothers me coming down to the U.S. is there's a sense that gun ownership is not only a right, but is a good thing. If you look at what happens in Canada and crimes related to guns and gun deaths, especially handguns, it's way less than in the U.S. And I don't think that's a coincidence.
So let me play devil's advocate with the example you gave on the previous question, which was to completely decriminalize drugs, right? Completely decriminalize it and let the kind of whole system work itself out because you think that it would actually be better. What if you were to take that same approach with guns here in the United States and saying just completely decriminalize guns? And if you want to get 80 of them, you can get 80 of them. Where does that line drawn between, okay, we do need to control this.
Right. And by the way, I didn't say decriminalize everything related to drugs, by the way,
Right,
to be
right,
clear.
right.
And I would say the same thing in the case of guns, although I don't think we necessarily want to always equate 2 different things and say that because you took this stance on this, you therefore
agreed.
have to take this stance on this other
But it's a
thing.
good talking point, right?
That's a good talking point, and it kind of makes some logical sense. I can see why you're going there, and I think it's very reasonable to still keep the whole gun thing open. I'm not saying shut down guns everywhere. I just think we need to visit the issue and be sensible and think it through. And I think there's a lot of people, I was talking about extremism here, there are some people who take what I would consider a very extreme position, and to their discredit, basically, the problem is, if you looked at the real numbers, and I think unfortunately many of these people don't want to look at the real numbers. If you look at the real numbers, and as objectively as they could, they would realize, my position really isn't a very good one, and it's not sustainable. But
So let's make another hard right, because
hard right.
Hard right.
Let's go left.
We don't want to make this all about one specific thing. Business in
Yeah.
Canada. So and again, I'm talking about what I know about here in America. I know that America does a pretty fairly good job of promoting small businesses and entrepreneurship. Now, I've also gone on rants against that, but in general, I can go create an LLC here today. And have my tax identification number within 3 to 4 days, and literally be up and running by next week, starting a business. Right? How is it? And I personally don't know. If I were to move to Canada, can I do the same thing? Can I start a business and do the exact same
A
thing?
little bit faster in Canada.
Oh,
but
really?
Yes. Yeah. Canada, for doing business, starting up companies, I've found, having done it in both countries, is better and easier in Canada. Is it dramatically better? No, it's slightly better. There tends to be a little bit more regulations in the U.S. and that could be because there's county and state sometimes and federal, and Canada doesn't have. It has a similar number of theoretical levels, but they don't usually apply them as strictly. But they're both pretty similar. Canada's probably slightly easier, but Canada's much smaller, so maybe that's part of why it's easier. I don't know.
Now, here in the United States, we have LLCs, S corps,
You do.
C corps, et cetera. What do you have in Canada? Same thing?
We don't have LLCs. That's the one big difference. An LLC isn't really a true corporation, but it doesn't give you legal protection. That we don't have.
Yeah.
If you we do have sole proprietorships like you have here. You don't have to even do an LLC, but then you don't get legal protection. We do have the equivalent of a C corp. You can do it at the state, and in Canada, of course, it's a province, or you can do it federally. So it's pretty similar, except we don't have LLCs.
Gotcha. Okay. I think we lost our video there. There's no more cameras right there. So we just have this big blinding white light in our face.
Still got audio, though.
You still got. Hopefully, we haven't even checked it. So, so going into the business side of things brings us into the tax situation.
Yes.
Good or bad?
Taxes in Canada are generally more, and the rumor you've heard is true. Certainly when I was in Canada, I had to file U.S. taxes because American citizen, which I have been. I was born in the U.S. You have to file taxes anywhere in the world.
Right.
And so I would file in both countries. And there's a tax treaty between Canada and the U.S. I pay my taxes locally in Canada. They were always more taxes in Canada than they were in the U.S., so I never had to pay any extra left over in the U.S.
What is so here in the United States? A typical tax rate is, depending on your income, so I'm going to go very vague and broad with this, could be anywhere from 30 to 40%, maybe even like 25 to 40%, based off of whatever it is. What about in Canada? What are we looking at?
It would be not that much different, at about 3 to 5 percentage points.
Okay.
The big difference, though, in terms of what you get for your money is in Canada, you don't pay for health care. It's covered.
Gotcha.
For everybody, universally.
Perfect segue. So tell me, so the majority of that money of my taxes are going for universal health care?
That's certainly a significant portion of it. Maybe that's almost the whole portion of it.
Now, there obviously are benefits and disadvantages of that.
Yes, I think overall there are more benefits than disadvantages, but the biggest disadvantage is
because you went through this recently, didn't you?
Yeah. I have health care in the U.S. and I have to pay for it, and don't love that. That's true, but you can do a little bit better on the tax thing, so it kind of comes out in the wash. I think for most people who don't have coverage, it would be worse to be in the U.S. in many ways, but certainly on the lower end of the income bracket. But the big problem in Canada for healthcare, though, I would say is, and you do hear this, and it does happen, the time to servicing you wait times can be definitely worse. Sometimes it's not a problem. Sometimes it could even be, in the extreme cases, can be a problem.
Now, has Canada had universal health care forever?
I think in the 50s.
In the 50s.
Yeah, I think it's roughly in the 50s. An NDP guy from Central Canada came out with Tommy, name escapes me, but yeah, we've had it for about 60 years up there.
Now, has there been any type of uproar or, any folks, any parties, any specific coalitions who wanted to overturn that and actually privatize it?
There was a fairly right-leaning party that was in government for a number of years recently that I don't think they were pushing very strongly to try to get rid of it. Nobody really has. It's been around so long, that's very firmly entrenched. What they were looking at was ways to supplement and allow people to pay for their own private care. And the big thing that an American audience would really probably be concerned about is, for the most part, you can't get private care in the U.S. You're in Canada. You're not even really allowed to pay for private care.
Right.
You can't get special treatment. You get regular.
You think that's a good thing or bad thing?
I think it would be useful to have a hybrid approach, because here's the funny thing. And again, I think you need to balance every issue. People might say, well, if you let people pay for it, they'll just pay for it and get better service. They will. But the money that goes into the people who put into the pot through just regular taxes will get better service, because you'll have fewer people on the top end using the service. So I think it'd be fine to allow
so nobody's going to Canada for, what's it called, like medical tourism or anything like that?
No. In fact, on that front, another funny thing is Canada recently is putting in legislation around assisted suicide. And they specifically put in legislation to block Americans or other people from other countries coming to Canada to help them die.
Right.
You have to be in Canada, resident of Canada, to be able to do that.
I think it's probably a safe policy to put in place.
Right.
Because there could be tons and tons of different whether they're the lawsuits or whatever, if one family member didn't necessarily want to do it, suing the Canadian government. So I understand that side of it. Yes. Wow. So we just got to assisted suicide in there. Jeez.
Wow. Threw it in there.
So the universal healthcare in Canada, compared to what we have now, you said, so right now it's kind of a hybrid system here in the U.S. or no? Compared to Canada?
I guess it's a hybrid system. I mean, in the U.S., what you have is employers paying for people's or contributing to people's health care.
Right.
In Canada, employers have been involved in contributing to extra health care to get better coverage for people. The big difference, though, is, if you look at like a Bernie Sanders type of comment, and what he says is there should be health care for all. In fact, Donald Trump also said there should be health care for all. So these are very Canadian type of sayings, and I think it would be useful, and I think it's kind of a right for everybody to have access to healthcare. Now, having said all of that, I basically try as much as possible to avoid healthcare use. In fact, I've been here 18 months. I haven't spent $1 based on the insurance that we've got, not a penny.
Right. But you have it, though, correct?
I have it because I think you kind of have to, because you can go bankrupt if you don't have some sort of...
Yeah.
Mine is more sort of emergency coverage for disaster.
Yes. Car accident,
Right,
there's definitely...
Somebody runs into you, things outside of your control.
Because you're very big in preventative nutrition, aren't you?
I'm huge on that.
How is actually the health and wellness aspect in Canada? Are they...
I wouldn't say it's much different than here. No. The quote Western medical system is pretty similar between the two countries. The biggest difference.
I'm actually talking about more of like a societal thing of like
yes.
going this more health and wellness route.
But that's reflected in the comment though about doctors. The doctors where people still lean on thinking doctors know about health and wellness, and doctors know about how to fix dramatic problems, but they generally aren't well trained, if not trained at all, in the area of preventive medicine.
Do you? But I actually had this thought, and this has nothing to do with Canada right now. But I actually had this thought the other day, and I hate to even call it a war, but for lack of a better term, I do think that we're winning the war on health and wellness in general over the past 5-10 years. 10, 15 years ago, or maybe you can call it like 10 years ago, if you just weren't feeling right, or nobody thought about changing their diet. It was, let me just go to the doctor, my heart's racing and this and that and the other. But now people are actually saying, well, maybe take a look at the diet first. And I think, not to toot our own horn, but there's a lot of other companies and websites and a lot of people that are doing it. I think people are finally starting to catch on to it.
I think that's very true, actually, that people are catching on to it. And in fact, we can see that from places like when Pepsi and Coca-Cola announced that their sales of soft drinks are actually going down in the U.S., which is a great thing. I mean, you have McDonald's coming out with quote unquote healthier menus. You could debate whether that's healthy or not, but they're definitely trying to go that route. Monsanto is actually starting their own organic line. And I know that that could be in a whole other podcast about that. But you're seeing a lot of the bigger brands and companies coming out with organic lines. Regardless, whatever you think about big corporations, big food, etc. There is a shift that's happening, which is good. And I don't think that's something that's often talked about, of saying, "Hey, we're winning. We're doing a really good job here." No, hey, and we're going in a good direction. We need to keep it up, and there's a lot more we can do. But I applaud that. I think it's a good thing. And I'm not anti-business. I've been in business my whole career, and I did a little bit of a nonprofit for a very short time. But I'm very pro-business and capital and free enterprise. I just would hope that everybody be responsible. I think that, and it comes down to, people criticize big business. Big business is run by individuals. And people say, well, the business has to do that. No, it doesn't. The people in the business can make different decisions. So, I challenge everybody out there, help your business to make better decisions.
I think there was somebody I heard this term, so it's not coming from me, but there's something called conscious capitalism, which is, hey, we're gonna do something, we're gonna make some money, but I'm also gonna put in some really good programs for my employees. We're also gonna do things for other folks that can't do it. We're gonna donate this, we're gonna donate that. You look at stuff like Tom's, they're donating shoes to every time somebody buys it, which let's call a spade a spade. That can be. That's a marketing tactic. Sure. However, it is getting somebody a pair of shoes too. And so they could be doing other things with that money that they're sending over there. And I think I truly think from a business standpoint, that's where a lot of these companies are going. It's going that route, which I think is good.
No, I think it's all very good. There's something as a trend. We talked about corporations before. There's a trend for people to start something called a B Corp. And so for people out there, you can look up B Corp on the web. And it's really a new type of corporation that's a bit of a hybrid between the total for-profit model and a nonprofit. It's still a for-profit, which is is good, but it does have an angle that's
Right.
more responsible.
And the funny thing is, and a lot of people think that nonprofits don't make money. They do make money. And here's the flip side of it. There's a lot of people out there who have nonprofits that aren't doing it for the right reason.
That's true.
And it's kind of being like a tax haven or a tax thing that they can actually avoid, which sucks, because that's not what it was set up to be.
Right, right.
So there's actually some really good conscious capitalists out there, and there's some not good nonprofit people out there. So
Sure,
it's up for you guys to
Yeah,
decide.
that's good. It's good not to paint everybody with one broad brush. I'm pretty opposed to that. I think
I
we
like
need
it.
to look at each thing.
Yes, being open is extremely important. in life.
Open-minded. Yep.
Yes. So how have you liked living in Florida?
Love it. We came here primarily because of the weather, of course, and the weather's
It sucks, doesn't it?
way better than Canada.
Yeah.
Here's what I say to my wife almost every single day. It's another beautiful day in Florida.
What's funny is your wife doesn't get my sarcasm. She was in here and she was telling me about how she walked the beach, and I said, "It wasn't terrible, was it?" And she said, "What?" And I said, "It wasn't terrible." She's like, "What do you mean it wasn't terrible?" I was like, "It wasn't terrible." And she's
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, it was nice, yeah."
It was really good. Really
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you down here in sunny South Florida, and we're doing a team dinner tonight, guys. Team dinner, yes, team dinner. Maybe not Steven, because I think we lost some video, so Steven's got to stay back and edit. No, it's been great. Thank you guys very much. This is going to wrap up episode 31 for the Alternative Daily, 31. And then our next one, hopefully, if we can do this, is Dr. Carmen Kolitz. We're going to have to do a revamp. We botched a podcast, David.
Yes, that one.
And we spent a lot of time fixing the audio, and it didn't fix. So that's going to be our next one coming up. So, David, thank you very much for joining us.
No problem.
And we will catch everybody later.
We just have one comment.
One comment, okay.
Lisa wants you to wish her happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Lisa. Or wasn't there?
Let me see if I can do this.
Happy birthday, Lisa.
I can't. I don't know.
That was from the-
Happy birthday. You sing it, David.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lisa. Happy birthday to you.
There we go, guys. We've never done that. We've never had a live. We've never had a live ask for a happy birthday thing. But Lisa is an avid listener and follower. So thank you very much, Lisa.
Have a good one, Lisa.
Thank you, guys.
Now the comments are rolling.
Oh, they are.
Comments are
what do we
rolling.
got?
Dishner says hi.
Oh, Dishner. Welcome back to the podcast, Dishner.
Siobhan says thank you. This was great.
Awesome, guys. Well, do we have Lisa's information already?
We did.
We do. Well, let's send her another bag of coffee and a hat, too. Let's send her out a hat, too, for her birthday. So thank you, guys. And this is going to wrap it up, and we will catch you guys later.
Sounds good.